Welcome back. We are at the point now where we're ready to start building our model that's going to go into our model box. I'm just going to walk you through some tips here. I'm not going to do the whole thing because you're going to find a way to do what you want to do with your set that works for your design ideas. But I did want to just give you some tips about some things that might make your life easier. Or maybe it won't. I encourage you to be creative with your approach to model building. So don't feel like you have to have walls and you have to have platforms if that's not part of your design approach. If you have something else that you are interested in exploring, please do that. So anyway, but we're going to start with the way to build some walls. So I've basically drawn out my walls. These are some that I had lying around from previous drafting. But I've drawn it out in the scale that I want it to be. And you can see here I've got this just pasted onto foam board, pasted onto cardboard, anything. You just want something that's got enough stability to it that it's not going to flop around and fall over. So I'm going to cut this out. And you'll notice I put some nice details on here, some nice trim molding. There's a door. If you want to do this a little more improvisationally and just, cut pieces to make walls as you go, you can certainly feel free to explore that as an option as well. I'm going to cut out this doorway. I have a nice sharp blade. If when you're cutting foam core, you start to feel it kind of drag or it's really tearing through as opposed to cutting nice and smoothly, that usually means that your blade is dull and you need to change the blade. Notice I'm turning my workpiece as I do this so that I'm always putting my straight edge over the piece that I want to keep. That way, if it goes wandering off, I haven't cut into something that I am planning to use. Across there. One more. Apologies if I sort of float in and out of the frame here. And also apologies for the fact that you have to watch the top of my head for a good chunk of this. So now I have my little wall cut out. I have also decided that I want to have some trim and I want to have some wallpaper. So I've decided, rather than painting mine, which I could certainly do this with paint as well, but because I have the stuff, I'm just going to do it this way. I found this scrapbooking paper that has kind of an interesting texture on it. So I want to use that for my walls. I'm going to glue that down onto there. And I'm going to glue some trim over the top of this once it's all said and done. So I'm not even going to worry too much about being really tidy with getting this on really precisely. I just want to get it in the general vicinity. Got a little extra glue there. It's okay. So I've kind of cut this down to an approximate size. But I know I'm going to have some trim that goes over there, so I don't really need to worry about getting that lined up perfectly. So, but I do want it to go all the way to that edge. And nice thing about glue sticks is you can kind of squish things around. And then I had this other paper that had kind of a nice wood grain, so I'm going to use that down here for my wainscoting. The wainscoting is that stuff that's at the bottom of the wall. And this is where it becomes really important to have some good research, because if you have good research, you'll find all of these things, these details that just add a little something extra to your design, as opposed to just having a big blank wall. Oops. And you need to squish over just a little. Okay, there we go. Now I can just take my knife, and I probably should use a straight edge just so that I don't cut into anything I don't want to cut into. We'll do it the right way. And I'm just going to trim this up. trimming it from the back because then I have a nice hard surface to work with. And I have a wall with some wallpaper and some wainscoting. Didn't quite get cut all the way through there. Okay. Sometimes if I get little fuzzy things, you can take a nail file and just kind of sand it down. Sandpaper also works, but I tend to have nail files in there. They're not so rough. So I have now my wallpaper and my wainscoting, and then I can cut out my trim. Here you can see I've taken my trim. I've just used Prismacolor markers, but again, you could use paint, you could use colored pencil. I've just colored in the trim. I haven't done anything with the wall. I'm just going to cut those pieces of trim out, and I'm going to then apply them to my wall. Here you can see a wall that I have done that to. So I have wallpaper here, wainscoting. I've just taken that trim. It's put onto the regular thin cardboard just to give it a little extra depth. And I've cut out my window frames and my chair rail, my baseboard, my cornice molding. I've just cut those out and applied them, just glued them straight on. And then I was looking at this and I decided that my windows needed curtains. So I drew out some little curtains just on regular old copy paper. And I'm going to glue those on. Again, I just use marker with these, but use whatever color media you have lying around. Problem with tacky glue is that every time you want to use it, it has glued itself shut. And I broke off a pencil in there. That's no good. There it is. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on there, just enough to hold it in place. And put my curtains on. I could do the same kind of thing if I wanted pictures on my wall. I could draw out little picture frames, or I could find little picture frames and print them out, glue them on, and now I have a nice little wall. I'm going to do the same thing with this one, except I'm not going to take the time to cut out all the trim molding. You know what I'm doing. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about attaching walls together. So if you can kind of see, if we have an inside corner like this, it's a little bit easier because there's no, if you get a good straight line, you can get these butted up against each other. And, you know, sometimes you have to do a little trimming with your applique pieces, with your trim pieces that you've stuck on, but you can usually get a pretty tight fit so you don't have a big gap in that corner. Where it gets a little tricky is if you have an outside corner. You can bevel this with a knife or with a little bit of sandpaper. For the purposes of this, as long as you get a nice clean corner, I wouldn't worry about it too much. You can see on this one, I've actually gone around and put marker on the edges of things. That just is to kind of clean it up so that when I'm looking at this in the model box, you know, I don't see a big white glaring edge up here. That's just, those are the kinds of attention to detail things that can really just help your model feel a lot cleaner and a lot more professional looking. So I encourage you to do those kinds of things. But let's say we want an inside corner like this, where we've got two walls meeting together. You can actually kind of get glue to help you here a little bit. You want to glue on that outside corner. And this is one of those places where, you know, you stick this together and the glue will kind of help hold it together. You might want a little bit of tape on the back just to hold it in place. Again, just until that glue has a chance to set up and dry. The nice thing about doing it this way is you have a little bit of flexibility, so you can kind of set this into your model and kind of adjust that angle until it's where you want it to be. I recommend sort of putting your walls together. Work with whatever works best for you, but for me, I usually find that if I put my walls together first and then glue them into the model box, I have a little bit better control over it. So you might think about that as you're putting your model together. What's going to be the easiest way to get things assembled? Also think about the order in which you're going to apply color. So if you're going to paint your model, you probably, maybe you do, but you probably don't want to put it all together and then try and paint it in the model box. It's probably going to be easier to paint the individual pieces, put them together, and then put them in the model box. So that's just a little bit about walls. Platforms can be really easy, platforms and stairs, if you have foam core or cardboard that is of an approximate thickness. This thickness of foam board, which is just your sort of standard foam board, if you just layer it up, it comes out to be a pretty decent stair height. And really any of the thinner foam cores are fine for this. So you can just layer up pieces in order to build. I hope you can see this, but there's, basically there's 4 layers of foam core in this little staircase unit that we have here. If you're not using foam board, you can always glue up some layers of corrugated cardboard if the stuff you have isn't real thick. This is about half the thickness of that. So maybe if I glued 2 layers of this together, I'd have something that was a pretty good step. So just kind of look at it proportionally, try and give it a go on the eyeball scale if you don't have a scale ruler, and try to get close. Generally step heights are somewhere between 6 and 10 inches. So you've got some leeway in there. But that's a great way to make platforms, and probably the easiest way to make platforms. You can do things like putting little basswood legs on them, but that gets a lot more complicated.